We get Mickey this week, and then he takes a pretty earned break before the wood chipper of a schedule begins with right before Cowboys training camp, and eventually, of course, everything else between now and if there's ever an off week in the NFL. Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com. Mickey, thank you very much for your time. Do you feel like the Cowboys' backup quarterback is currently on their roster?
I wouldn't put your money on it.
Okay.
I think they still got wandering eyes that they keep kind of scanning the field out there. And, they haven't come up with much. I think the last guy they worked out was a guy by the name of Cake Cookus, former Northern Arizona quarterback, went undrafted, and I heard he had a good workout. But again, if they're going to bring somebody in, you would probably want somebody that has more experience than the three guys they have. And that wouldn't take much, David, because of the three guys, they've totaled 2 starts in their NFL career, and both of those starts were last year. So, and there's still a chance, if they remain patient, because obviously whatever's out there now hasn't really caught their attention, that maybe a veteran quarterback during training camp gets released. All these teams that brought in first round quarterbacks, they might say, you know what, this guy's a little better than we thought. We might not need this veteran guy as a safeguard. So I think there's always that possibility. Now, the other thing that you have to consider is they don't have a heck of a lot of money available under the salary cap at this point. And they might even, just to do normal operations during the season, might have to restructure another contract. So whatever they get, it's going to have to be for, no more than maybe $2 million base salary on a 1-year deal. And I don't know if somebody wants to come here because some other teams might have backup quarterback needs. So I think it's still to be determined.
All right, Mickey, I know that Randy Gregory's going to start. DeMarcus Lawrence is going to start. Leighton Vander Esch will start. And Trayvon Diggs is going to start. After that, I'm starting to get a little foggy. Do you have an idea of maybe not where they're exactly going to play, but who's going to start on defense?
No, I think you're probably accurate there. And, even Leighton Vander Esch, if we include him as one of those starters, what spot's he starting in? Is he in the middle, weak side? But I think he's one of them because I think, until Micah Parsons proven, I think Leighton Vander Esch is the best linebacker on this team. But you're right. After that, I think that's what we go to training camp to find out. I think there's going to be a whole lot of competition for not only starting jobs, but rotation jobs. Because if you think about it, I think from what I've taken from Dan Quinn, he's a big believer in matchups. And so you may start the game, but if a team's doing this, we might do that. If they've got players that I don't think my starters can match up with from the beginning, I might bring in another guy. And he has talked about having options. And I think they have options, but that's going to play out in training camp. And I think you're exactly right. If you look at the offense, probably we know every starter that they're going to have. But from a defensive standpoint, I think it's up for grabs other than those 3 or 4 guys.
Mickey, do you view this as a crucial year for Ezekiel Elliott?
I think that, to the point where, if he doesn't have a good year, they're going to cut him. I don't think he's in jeopardy of that. And I think the thing you got to consider, and I wrote about it on Friday, is the fact that the Cowboys' offensive line wasn't very good last year. And if the offensive line wasn't very good protecting quarterbacks, then what makes we think that they did a good job run blocking? And they didn't. And when you have that type of talent missing the amount of games they missed, the running back's probably going to struggle. And, I'm not big on all this analytic stuff, but I did see some stat that talked about the percentage of plays he was hit, at the 1 yard line. 1 yard into the carry. or at the line of scrimmage. And it's amazing. So if the offensive line's not playing well, probably is your running back's going to struggle. And I understand that he had a couple fumbles early, a couple of those where he was trying to do too much. But if you go back and look at some of the stuff, he turned 1-yard games into 3. And I know that's not great, but they struggled run blocking. And here's the other thing, Craig. If you're a defensive coordinator and there's no Dak Prescott and there's no really top offensive lineman on the field, who are you worried about stopping? Mm-hmm. Probably Ezekiel Elliott. And you're just going to say, I'll take my chances with these backup quarterbacks and the receivers, but Ezekiel Elliott's not going to beat me. And I think that lended to their problems running the football last year.
So the Combine has been in Indianapolis forever. The NFL Draft, of course, it was in New York forever. And eventually that's now been moved around, and it's kind of each year it changes. The Combine looks like it's going to be up for grabs for everybody. How much does the star, or even perhaps even the monster of all, the AT&T Stadium, how does that play, you think, with Jerry and the Cowboys hosting the Combine?
Oh, I think they probably would like to do that, but there's another level to just the facility you actually do the workouts in. You got to have the medical capabilities where this thing is held to be able to go through, 300 and some physicals and all the testing they do. And, in Indianapolis, they got this thing down to a science with the medical people that participate in the Combine. And when I've talked to, the Cowboys medical people, doctors, trainers, whatever, in the past, before any of this came up, they hailed the Indianapolis's downtown ability to take care of all the medical stuff that they have to do. Now, at the Star, if they did it at Ford Center, well, there's a Baylor Scott and White rehab facility across the street that's probably pretty capable of doing some of it, but I don't know if they're capable of doing it all. And so I think that factors into this idea of moving the Combine. So it's not so much the workout spot, but it's where do we house all these guys? You guys have been downtown Indianapolis probably.
Yep.
And there's all the hotels and it's walking distance to the stadium. They don't have that in Arlington. Somewhat in Frisco, it's getting better. But those are other considerations that they have to take into account when they decide if they're going to move the Combine. That is just a pretty smooth operation in Indianapolis.
Yeah, Mickey, I wonder, well, especially for an event that's not attended by fans, like what what money they think they're going to get from it.
Yeah, unless they decide, that's going to be part of it too, It's like, well, let's have some attendance at this other than just the scouts and agents and things like that. So that could be another thing, before, they weren't big on letting too many people into the draft. And then when they started moving that around, all of a sudden that turned into be a pretty big fan event. So, they've got the capability and probably the money to, pull something off like that, but they've got to take into account the medical part of the Combine, which is one of the more important things that I think take place there, along with the interviews that teams try to conduct with the players.
Mickey, you have covered Jerry since day one, and you have been around the Mavericks as far as in the city of Dallas and watching and covering sports there since Mark Cuban took over the Mavericks. How different are those two, or are they very much the same?
Well, I think the difference is from Jerry's standpoint, he has leaned on family members to basically make the most important decisions on that team, along with the head coach. But it's not like, he's got to go through a layer of other people to come to some sort of decision. He can go over to Steven's house and they can figure it out, or just walk down the hallway. So I think in that aspect, it is different. I don't know how, I don't think we all thought Mark Cuban was such hands-on, but maybe he is. And maybe this has been an indication, but just listening to Rick Carlisle or whatever, reading some of his remarks today, he sounds like he was pretty indignant about whatever was going on and decided, I want out of here. So yeah, they've got a thing on their hands now. It's going to, they keep saying, well, we're going to hire a GM before we hire a head coach, but Cuban's got to sign off on, whatever. He's going to have to sign off on the GM. He's going to sign off on whoever. If the GM makes a decision, he has to sign off on who the head coach is. So, yeah, it's somewhat different, but not totally different from, I think, what we've seen now over these last couple of weeks there on kind of the ladder of decision making that's going on with the Mavericks. And this is going to be an interesting one to watch.
Mickey, you've covered the Cowboys a long time, and I think one thing fans don't see is how organizations kind of morph and change. And look, Jerry Jones is still pretty much the same dude that bought the team in 1989, But I do think a lot of fans still, just when they see him, see 1989 Jerry Jones, just like you watch a television show and that actor is always going to be that to you, no matter what he does after that. What has changed with Jerry that you've noticed, especially over the time, that would be different than Jerry day one that a lot of fans still cannot get past in their minds?
Well, I think Jerry day one was probably different than Jerry year 5 because he learned the NFL. He was pretty much in those first few years at the mercy of his coaching staff. And then finding people in the scouting department that he trusted. So he leaned on Jimmy for several years. And then when Jimmy was gone, I think that, he, by osmosis of being around it, being a smart guy, kind of knowing the game of football from playing in college, I think he picked some things up. But I think that the way it's changed now, maybe within the last 5 years, is from a more of a day-to-day operation. Stephen Jones, he might as well be the general manager. I know Jerry has the title, but Stephen and Will McClay kind of running the player personnel part of it. And then, of course, before they make any major decision or whatever decision they do make, they run it by him, and he'll sign off. But I think from a day-to-day operation, those guys, in conjunction with whoever's the head coach, they've been scouring the waiver wire. They've been, providing Jerry the information for the draft. And I think that's probably some that has changed over the last, like I said, 5 or 6 years, from a day-to-day operation.
Mickey, who's more important health-wise? And I think Zach Martin's last year was more obviously that's the exception. He has not had long-term issues like Tyron Smith has struggled with at times because he's getting older, plays a physical sport. But who has to stay healthy, Tyron Smith or Zach Martin?
I'm not allowed to say both.
No. I mean, you obviously that's the right answer, but just if you could pick
well,
one
let's
or the other.
let's put it this way. To me, Zach Martin, not because he plays guard, because they better have it in their mind that if one of those tackles gets hurt, he's the backup tackle. I'll take my chances with somebody else playing guard, like they did it towards the end of the year with Connor McGovern. Who they finally decided, okay, this guy's ready to play. But I don't think that they can waste time with some veteran backup that somebody else didn't want, and you bring in and say, okay, that's my swing tackle, because that hurt them last year. They should have made the decision a lot earlier to move Zach Martin out to tackle. So for that aspect, I think because he can do two things for you, then it's Zach Martin. But I think if you talk to the medical people, they think Tyron Smith's surgery to repair the disc in his neck is going to take care, it's going to have a trickle-down effect and certainly relieve him of some of the back problems he also was having. And he even said it himself. He felt like he was in the best physical shape of his life, meaning not from a conditioning standpoint, but just all the things that had bothered him. He thought, the back was tied to the neck. So, they seem to have full confidence that Tyron and La'el Collins are ready to go. I've seen La'el Collins work out, and he's running. I mean, he was working out with Dak and doing the same stuff Dak was doing. But within reason, right? He's a lineman. He's not a quarterback. But the running part, the drills, he looks like he's good to go. So at this point, their confidence in those offensive tackles, I think, is reflected in what they did in the draft, right? They didn't draft the first round offensive lineman. They didn't take one until the fourth round, which is about where I thought they should take it if they had confidence in those offensive tackles being ready to go. And at this point, even though they didn't go through any of the OTA practices or the minicamp practices, that was by design. Those guys didn't, in their way, you're not going to win the NFC East in April and May and June, but I want them in tip-top shape by time July 21st comes around, or July 22nd when they have their first practice in Oxnard. And by all indications, they feel both of those guys will be ready to go. And Zach Martin obviously being ready to go also with that strained calf that he suffered.
Mickey, thank you very much. Enjoy your break. We can't wait. That means when you get back, we're on the verge of training camp and also the NFL season, of course, soon after that. Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com with us on Thursdays at 4:30. When we come back,